in your opinion, was the most impactful moment in your life?
Wow. Ooh, that was good. That's good. I shared with you all that in 2013, I was diagnosed with HIV. It was very hard for me. It was very difficult. But that actually wasn't the most impactful time in my life. It was about a year later, my mother came to me, and she sat next to me, and she said, "Baby, you are quite amazing." I said, "Oh, thank you, Mom. Appreciate that." She says, "But you are going to need a lot of angels to get you through all the many great things that you're going to go through in life." And a year after I turned HIV positive, my mom quit her job, and she came to work for me full time. And she has been there by my side, helping me to run and grow and develop True Evolution for the last 6 years. And it has been the most humbling thing to have my mother at my side. She works with me every day. She serves as my organization's chief of staff. And it was that moment that was the most impactful for me, because it allowed me to have a connection with someone that I hold so dear to my life, that affirmed me and was there for me and has been my guiding angel. And one of the things I really appreciated about some of the things that I saw on people's table was everyone wrote family. Like, a lot of folks wrote family on their papers, and I see a lot of heads nodding because the family means a lot to us. So for me, having that connection with my mother and establishing that relationship with my family, particularly going through some struggles and trials as I'm trying to build this agency while also navigating my own trauma, that was probably the most transformative time for me, to know that my family, my village, my tribe was there for me. Yeah.
Go ahead, we're going to switch sides.
Cool.
So as youth all here, we have ASB, or we have the Youth Advisory Council. How did you create the opportunity for yourselves to be able to get to where you are, like you said, meet Barack Obama?
I thank you for asking that question, because I'm trying to ask myself that question. So I'll give you two answers. I'll give you a concrete answer, and I'll give you kind of a more spiritual, deeper answer. So concretely, really it's about relationships. Relationships are everything. And I was able to get to the place that I was and be able to have the opportunities that I have because of the relationships that I had built. That's one thing I would say that I'm pretty gifted at. It's a natural gift of mine, is that I'm really great at building deep and meaningful and intimate relationships with my friends, with my work colleagues, with my expanded network, with mentors, with elders, with young people, and it's creating those networks which open up opportunities for you. And more on a deeper spiritual level is I believe in this thing called providence. If anyone has heard of that word, providence is a guiding force that just carries you through life as you tap into your purpose. Not all of you are meant to be appointed officials for Barack Obama. Not all of you are meant to work in elected office. Some of you are going to be artists. Some of you will be athletes. Some of you are going to be some of the backbones of our science, technology, engineering, and math. Some of you will be elected officials, and some of you will run for county supervisor one day. But each of you has a purpose. Each of you are equipped with exactly what you need to be very successful at whatever it is that you are destined to become. And the relationships that you build in the course of that providence, in the course of your purpose, in discovering who you are and what you're meant to do in this world, it's the relationships that matter the most. And so that's why I hope each of you walk away from this space not simply taking this as another summit or another opportunity or a way to get out of class, but that you also take this as an opportunity to build real relationships. Because I promise you, 15 years ago, the people at San Pedro High School had no idea that they were sitting next to the next political appointee for the first black president of the United States of America. Nobody knew that. And so right now in this room, you are already sitting next to captains of industry and science. You are sitting next to the next elected official, the next leading community organizers. You're already sitting next to celebrities and athletes and artists and musicians. They are in this room right now. They are your brothers and your sisters, your colleagues, your friends, your peers, your teachers, your advisors, your principals. They are already here in this room. And so as you guys are building that, you're growing, you keep connected to these people, to this village that is here. Never forget where you come from and never forget the relationships that you've built. And I promise you, whatever success that you're going after, it's going to be magnified tenfold. I see two in the back. Oh, right here. Go ahead. Yes.
What advice can you give to tomorrow's leaders who really want to make a change in their community, but they fall into obstacles with people in power who try so hard to keep their voices silent?
I'm sorry, adults. I can't. I have to respect my young people. Flip the damn table over and resist the establishment, please. I'm serious. Defiance. Radical audacity. I'll share a little story with you. So I also serve on the board of directors of the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation is the largest HIV service organization in the world. They're in 39 different countries, in 15 different states, and they have over 485 healthcare centers around the world. And I mostly work on expanding access to healthcare for young people in developing nations. So I primarily work in the northern part of Africa and in South Africa, expanding opportunities for youth and young people who are living with HIV. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation had their board of directors retreat in New Orleans last year. And after the board retreat was over, I went to go get a haircut. And the haircut, I went to a poor neighborhood in Algiers, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Louisiana. And while I was there, I met a barber, and he asked me the same question. He said, young brother, young brother, young brother, young brother. So as a young brother today, how do we disrupt this system? You know, how do we shake things up? You know, what do we do? And I said, you need to have audacity. You need to be willing to flip the table over. You have to be willing to march and protest and defy. You have to be willing to move against the establishment. And often, the people who you love the most are people often that are the ones that hold you back. The status quo is something that so many people are committed to. Okay? And as young people, you all have the ability and the capacity to disrupt our systems. Disrupt it. Change only occurs when people have the courage to move past it. And so I would ask you, to please continue your advocacy. Continue to disrupt things. And the greatest advice that I would give you is to form coalitions. Coalitions are the greatest way in the way to put forth an agenda. And so all the people that are in this room, your peers, your colleagues, these are the folks that you need to be building coalition with. And as a unified front is how you disrupt the status quo. It is how we disrupt the system. And never be afraid to defy the establishment. Okay.
Hi. So everyone here has their own definition or interpretation of justice. And I wanted to know, what did you think that justice is? What does justice mean to you?
Wow. I think for me, justice is when an individual, and whoever they are, can show up fully in the world and be received by it. And I know that's not quite the radical term that maybe you were looking for. But simply, all of us in this world are simply to show up to be who we are. I have a couple of friends, really close friends, who are on a different side of the political spectrum. I'm a little bit more of a liberal. I'm an activist. I'm black. I'm brown. I'm queer. I get as far on the left as you can go. But some of my closest friends are quite conservative. And we have different political ideologies. And we have different ways that our politics show up in the world. Particularly my family. My entire family is quite conservative. And for me, justice is the ability for them to show up in the world just as much as it is for me. And that their opinions and that their values and their belief systems matter no less or no more than my own. And so if I want to be a change agent in the world, it is up to me to not only show up in my own politics, in my own identity, but to be receptive of the politics, identities, and experiences of those who may not look like me, who may not speak the languages I speak. They may not pray to the same God that I pray, but I respect them for who they are. I receive them in their identity, and I give them space to also coexist mutually in our politics. And that's going to show up differently in different spaces, and that's going to look different, and it's going to transform itself over the years. But if we can set an intentionality that each of us matters, that each of our stories are relevant, and that each of our lived experiences somehow hold a place in this thing that we are building called civilization. And that if each of us can create space for one another and receive that, that in itself, to me, is a society of true justice.
My name is Layla Ziani. I'm part of the 3rd District YAC, Youth Advisory Council. And my question to you is, throughout your speech, I kind of noticed that you were talking about the heavy inequality and kind of injustice that many of us experience, not only in this country, but throughout the world.
Yep.
And as an Arab American, I have experienced a lot of that. And so my question to you, as a Black Latino man, is how do you think is the best way to set race relations in this nation to make it a more prosperous country for the next generation?
Oh. You guys are so smart. Oh my goodness. It is too early for you guys to be this smart. I love it. I love it. Thank you for that question. Thank you, sister, and I honor you for being here, so thank you. Race is a very difficult subject. And it's difficult because when we talk about race, we have to talk about inequality. And when we talk about inequality, we have to talk about privilege. And talking about privilege makes people very uncomfortable. This country was built, and we must acknowledge it, this country was built on the backs of slaves that died. Okay? We just have to give recognition to that. And not only slaves, but indigenous communities who were here long before us, who we railroaded over like they were yesterday. We have to acknowledge the history of institutionalized oppression. We have to acknowledge the systemic injustices that built the wealth of this country. We have to acknowledge that the Constitution, in its original form, was not written for anyone else but white, Christian, male landowners. That was the exact source of empowerment of the Constitution when it was first created in its etymology. Over the years, we've evolved. We've added the Bill of Rights. We've added amendments. We've come a long way. And where we sometimes find ourselves halting in progress for justice as it relates particularly to race relations is an inability to acknowledge our history. We don't want to acknowledge the past. We don't want to talk about how women have been oppressed for so many years in this country, how patriarchy has been a force that has perpetuated misogyny against women. We don't want to talk about the black and brown fragmentations that occurred in the early 1990s when black and brown people were cohabitating poor neighborhoods and couldn't find a way to reconcile that they were both oppressed people. We often have this conversation that marginalizes our white brothers and sisters who often do not feel like that they are also a part of this experience of injustice. Injustice, equality, and equity is not just my concern, but it is also yours too. That each of us are a part of this fabric and that we are each woven and interconnected in building this society together. But we cannot begin to move forward in our future until we can acknowledge our history. And acknowledging the history of how this country was built on the oppression and institutionalized racism that this country has moved through. And if we cannot begin to do that, then we cannot begin to have remedy. One of my favorite authors is Michelle Alexander, who wrote The New Jim Crow. And she said, a racial caste system does not require overt bigotry or racial hostility to thrive. A racial caste system needs only racial indifference. Indifference. Our inability to have the conversation. Our apathy that moves us away from talking about conversations that are uncomfortable, like privilege and power. When we can acknowledge the structures of privilege and power that have been the foundation of this country for over 520 years, then we cannot begin to heal and move race relations forward in a way that produces an equitable and equal society for all of us. Thank you. Good? I don't want to take up time of other presenters.
Time for one more brief question.
Okay.
Somewhere in the front of here. Or if someone has it, there's 1, 2.
Oh, I see.
Go ahead and pick, because I don't know, there's 2 people, I don't want to play favorites. Go ahead. Right here?
I see multiple hands up to you. Yeah.
No, you go ahead and pick.
Right there. I saw his hand go up first. Right there. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'll just stay standing. All right, so my question is, so I just looked at your page for Revolution 8, and so it says you guys fight for LGBTQ justice and HIV/AIDS advocacy. So my question is, like, as an organization, considering that we had a midterm elections coming up in November, do you guys find yourself endorsing a specific congressional candidate, or do you kind of are you comfortable with your comments right now?
Thank you. So as a 501c3 nonprofit organization, we receive public benefit dollars, meaning a lot of my funding actually comes from governments, comes from taxpayer dollars. Some of it comes from the private sector, but a large number of it also comes from taxpayer dollars. So as a nonprofit organization, we do not take any partisan stances on political candidates one way or the other. And that's actually restricted in our ability in our charter as a 501c3. However, having said that, there are some elected officials that me, Gabriel Maldonado, I personally do support. So in November of 2016, when the election results came out, I knew that the ideologies and the framework for how this new administration was going to approach social justice, I knew that it was going to require me to change up my advocacy a little bit. And so I stopped going to Washington, D.C., and I started going to Sacramento. And the reason for that is because often when we lead with our politics or our civic engagement, we think about how our federal government impacts our lives. But really, the majority of your lives are shaped every day by your local officials. Your city councilmen, your county supervisors, your state assembly members, your senators, those are really who have a large amount of responsibility of how your everyday lives work and operate. And so I caught a flight to Sacramento, and I started working with the state of California. And so one of my passionate legislators, who I am a huge supporter of, and I have never openly spoken about any particular candidate, but I'm a big supporter of Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes in Corona, Norco. And yes, let's give her a round of applause. She is a fighter. She is my peer. She is my peer group. She is one of the first openly lesbian, Latina women millennials to be elected in this region. And it is my true honor and pleasure to be able to see someone who looks like me, who has my lived experience, who thinks somewhat as I do, who holds values and belief systems that I can share with. And I think that all of you, each of you, should really take up in looking at your elected officials locally here. And look for people who share the same values as you, even if that's not the same values as me and you. But you look for people who share your own values. And so if I had to endorse any particular candidate, definitely Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes of the Corona Norco area is someone that I'm a champion for, particularly because she's a millennial, so she's one of us. So thank you all. Thank you for your questions. Thank you all for this space and this opportunity. And I just want to honor you all for this space. So give you all a round of applause.